Welcome to Inform TV. I'm Alan Repke, Alexandria, Minnesota. Today, this 29th day of May 2020, I'm going to be talking about the violence and the fire and the mismanagement of a government that needs to be modernized. A government that needs to get some people in place that actually know what they're doing and understand the shortcomings of mankind. You can't have a meaningful civilization or a democracy unless you have leaders in charge when we get a disastrous situation like we had with the death of Mr. Floyd here. Very tragic issue. And I want to get into the start here of who actually lit the fuse so Minneapolis burned last night. And it's very clear the people that lit the fuse are three lawyers. Three people that should have known better than anybody what needed to be done by superior, or what is viewed as superior legal people. And who I'm getting at is Erica MacDonald, the U.S. attorney that heads the courthouse, the federal courthouse in Minneapolis. And I'm also going to talk about Mike Freemen, the Hennepin County attorney that should know what is going on in his biggest city, but obviously didn't in any manner, shape, or form. And then the other person that was not there at that news conference that actually lit the fuse, or at least I didn't see him, is Keith Ellison, our state attorney general. We had what is supposed to be the three sharpest minds to see that justice comes forward. And instead of doing that, what did they do? They lit the fuse for the disastrous outcome we had on the night of the 28th and the 29th. They are clearly the most despicable culprits, and all three of them should be forced to resign. Anybody watching this, if you want to get some justice for Mr. Floyd, get rid of those three powerful attorneys that are in a position that should have not lit the fuse, but should have been talking to our governor to see that we had the National Guard out, should have told the governor we must have an overnight closure of the streets, everybody stay at home. And what I'm getting at, that despicable news conference that these two attorneys got, I don't think I saw Keith there because it was too stupid. I turned it off finally. But Erica tells us, starts a news conference to the press and to the people of Minneapolis, especially the black community, that we're going to have a news conference, and they all expected the arrest of that officer that put his knee on Mr. Floyd. And if nothing else, get him arrested for his own safety. And what did they do instead? They botched it. 3 o'clock came and they weren't ready. So what did they do? They waited till 5 o'clock. And then they still weren't ready. Instead of just not coming to the podium, just tell the media we had a glitch or something in the process and leave it at that. No, Erica MacDonald, the U.S. attorney, Trump's U.S. attorney, that the Republicans should be screaming at Trump and everybody in the Republican Party, as well as any elected official in Minnesota, that woman goes right now. And what I'm getting at, she gave a sermon about how wonderful she was as a judge and all this, and we haven't got things quite together. I encourage you to watch it. And then Mike Freemen comes forward and with his mask or whatever, and does a little gobbledygook as well. And they said we have the best of all people working on this, and we have the best guy in the background there from the FBI. And when I started to see this, I turned it off. And why? Because I knew, as a seasoned politician insider, lobbyist, guy called when disaster hits what you have to do. And I just thought, how could you people be so mind-boggling stupid to leave it there? And then when we look at some of the other people, the culprits that were in the Twin Cities yesterday, they bring Jesse Jackson in. Why do you good black people still let Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton? They have been a disaster for your community for decades now. And you bring those guys in? You have wonderful black people, far more than just athletes, but why didn't you bring in some athletes to talk some sense? And we sit here coming up to a presidential election, and your hand-picked man is who? Biden. Now, the question I asked to the people of the Twin Cities, especially you people in African American community, you've handpicked Biden, or the Democrats have handpicked Biden for you. Do you really want Senator Klobuchar to be his vice presidential pick? I think it's about time you make it very plain to the Democratic Party, both on a national level as well as state of Minnesota. You want nothing to do with Amy Klobuchar when it comes to a vice presidential thing. If where was she on this whole thing? Why wasn't she talking to those guys? She was a former Hennepin County attorney, just like Freeman. Didn't she call those people up and say, when it got delayed, what are you people doing? This is going to be a disaster. When she saw that, she should have been watching. What about Tina Smith? Wasn't she watching? Then we've got 8 other congressmen in this state. Weren't they watching? Why weren't they calling our Supreme Governor, Governor Walz, that has put us on lockdown and supposedly has a background or 20 years in the National Guard? At this point, I haven't had a chance to research his background. Why? Because I'm broke and yet still trying to speak out as a proven leader, that we have to do something. Why wasn't our congressional delegation on the phone with our governor to say, hey, you need the Red Bull in downtown Minneapolis and St. Paul overnight, or you're going to have incredible disaster on your hand. You're going to have to lock down the whole city of Minnesota, and I'm missing the term, you know what I'm talking about, that no one is out on the streets tonight, and that's all there's to it. The protests, we're going to welcome protests, organized protest, but it's going to be during the day, and by 8 o'clock the streets are empty. I just can't believe how the mass stupidity that was handled on the afternoon of the 28th and overnight, and then when we say the Democrats got their hand-picked, because he wasn't part of Super Tuesday. You know, he won it, but you talk about a disastrous primary thing. It was even worse than the Republicans had when we got Trump. And what I'm getting at is, why don't you Republicans demand that Obama, Biden, and Hillary take a foreign policy victory lap right coming into the Democratic National Convention? Get them to rent the Pope Mobile so they can stand out for everybody to see and start their foreign policy tour before the National Convention of the Democratic Party by going through their refugee camps in Jordan, and so everybody can see what their time in the White House did on a global basis, on a foreign policy basis, and then of course drive the Pope Mobile into Syria and see how wonderful Syria is when Obama and Biden and Hillary made the decision, and the Democratic Party, that we want no responsibility for doing a no-fly zone. We're going to just let peace reign, and they weren't even smart enough to understand it. In politics, when there's a void, a skunk is going to come in and run the show. In comes Putin. And what happened to these poor Islamic people that we have in our media here telling us like Islam is the greatest religion ever and it's their religion of choice. And I'm for freedom of religion as a Christian, don't get me wrong. But when I look at back to our tour in Syria, we needed to have all the British Broadcasting Society and all our full power networks in this country following the Pope Mobile with Biden, Obama, and Hillary taking a tour, and then of course do the same route when Hillary was in charge of whatever anniversary it was of 9/11, and do a tour down to where that poor ambassador was ambushed and killed, and yet at the same time Hillary had a militia as Secretary of State at the time, or at least where I read, of 37,000 troops or police at her disposal. And what did she do? Absolutely nothing. And then now I want to take a look here on the state level. Is our state legislature, especially our Republicans, Leader Doubt and I'm blank, our Senate leader, and demand we have an immediate special session of the Minnesota legislature to rein in our governor and our constitutional officers as well as our congressional people. And get a session where we get the junkyard's daughter that lives like a Republican, Speaker Hortman, that I have respect for, but not when she conducted a session where her people were afraid to come to the floor of the House, afraid to represent the people. And all we can assume now, if the Republicans would be brave enough to stand up to the governor, we're supposed to have a balance in our system to actually call for this special session and demand everybody in the Senate as well as the House shows up to discuss and do the business of the people of Minnesota. I told in one of the programs here, I don't even know if it ever got. This should be program 4, but I only saw 2, and the first one was my poorest. I just wanted to get something on the air and see if I understood their upload system, but things didn't work out. But I got something out there. And then back to our U.S. Attorney. If you look at that piece that I wrote, I had a drug informant here in Alexandria that was promised by the previous Obamas, Andrew Luger, that he was going to get compensated and protected for being a drug informant in here in the city of Alexandria. And they kept telling him, no, justice takes time, and all these documents are sealed. So we've got 2 incompetent U.S. attorneys here in Minnesota, and no one is holding either one of them responsible. And the guy that I actually recorded and twice. The first time I was out in the streets of Alexandria, I had death threats. I had a guy flip a knife at me and another guy drive by. You want to get shot, buddy? You talk about this drug house in Alexandria. You screw up our drug trade here at exit 103. Your life is in danger. And I said, hey, guy, I've been in federal prison. I've lived with death threats every day. I mean, this is not a big deal for a guy like me. And but then back to our Governor Walz, that has become our supreme leader and has said we can't do this, we can't do that. I had a letter. I appreciate the guy sending me a letter. What kind of moron are you? Well, the reality, sir, I can't even get a haircut and not a shave, but at least my beard look decent. And yes, I'm the first one to admit I have a radio face, but the only way I can, if I ever get going with my own full power channel in the Twin Cities and all over the state, which I know how to do. You see my name there, as well as you see Informed Assets. That's a non-existent LLC, but if somebody send me a little money, or your legislature, your special property, give me access to what you're giving to PBS each year, that private broadcasting society that on Almanac had Keith Ellison dressed and in his office, right across from the governor, who at least it appeared to me 2 weeks ago, in his Islamic costume. So we had PBS, publicly funded TV, promoting Islam all across North Dakota, because it goes all across North Dakota, the Minnesota channel, that you people give over $500,000 a year, so it happens, yet you censor me off the air. I've got a transmitter sitting on an 1,100-foot tower, and I know how to cover the whole Red River Valley. I did the engineering study on getting my own full power or meaningful signal in the Twin Cities, just like the Hubbard family. And I was watching TV last night, and I want to commend Mrs. Nelson, or whatever it is, I'm blanking her first name. She did the best job of at least trying to say, we're our elected officials. But she should have crucified the mayor of St. Paul when he got there, rather than respect him. And where are you? What are you guys doing? The answer is you're doing absolutely nothing. And but you can't broadcast. The First Amendment isn't allowed. Everybody laughs at me about First Amendment. That was the First Amendment for a reason. Our forefathers found out once you give people title, wealth, and a status, they all become rotten, whether they're U.S. attorneys, or they're cops, or they're judges, or they're freedom to farm farmers. I've lived with all these righteous people, or whether it's my ELC Lutheran Church that won't even open the Bible camp to have a service out in the open right by the lake, where we can easily put 250 people and still have a breakfast served outside. No, they're protecting. They don't have this understanding with my Lord and Savior's that where he said, fear not, I am with you always. And so whether it's churches or whatever, I fully believe, and I was raised in a community at the time, it's totally different now, that you have an obligation to be a good person. You have an obligation to see that civilization is operated in a democracy form. And when it isn't, and when it starts to fail, you modernize our democracy. We got all these county governments. We've got here in Alexandria, we should be branching out our city boundaries. My landlady takes advantage of me big time, as well as the people before me. The lady left. Yet when I turn it into Alexandria Township, these group of thugs, as well as the Douglas County Commissioners, or the mayor and city council member, they just laugh. Al, we got selective TV to take you off the air finally with the help of thriving financial experts. They knew how to finally get a sword in your side, and because I offended one of their important people. I wanted to get my own channel so I could start making money. I did it over 4 years, and I just wanted my full channel, like I want to bring down to you guys. So there's one high def or two high def channels, or one high def and 5 standard defs. I would give a platform for the black community, for the Asian community, for the Latino community, and the Caucasian community, to have meaningful discussions. I want you to come out to Alexandria, where this house where I live, and let that be a place to gather when we have different sides. Beautiful locations, lake on both sides of me. Even though I'm a vagrant, I figured I found this place. Why? Because nobody else would deal with a bully landlord. And yet there's two houses here. I'd like to live in one and use the other one to bring some common sense, to put both the Democratic Party in Minnesota and the Republican Party in a place where we arbitrate some issues and see that it's just not a party fight. And you see, people, we're running out of time. We have this massive debt. We have Governor Walz that needs to be forced by the Republicans in the House and the Senate at the state capitol to open this thing up. People, you guys in the Twin Cities aren't even going to have food with what's going on. They burned your grocery stores down. Truck drivers aren't even going to want to go into the land of the Chamber of Commerce of the Twin Cities. I just had to laugh with almost tears in my eyes when I think about, boy, the Chamber of Commerce of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the 7 county areas, they wanted to have the Super Bowl and the Final Four and all this, so the world knows who Minnesota is. Now they know who we are. We're a bunch of idiots that can't manage the shortcomings of mankind in any manner, shape, or form. And I'm going to be the only one talking about it, and MCN6 probably will censor my last show, even I've paid for it, because you guys wouldn't send me a $100 bill or anything to keep this thing going. You won't even send me an email to al@informtv.com to see if anybody's out there. In fact, I'll have a drawing. If anybody sends me an email to al@informtv.com, I'm going to have a $50 drawing, and I'm not going to pay my rent. I'm current on it. Maybe I'll even make it $100, but it'll be $50 for sure. And then I get to see if anybody out there of the so-called 500,000 households that get cable TV in the Sunday district look at it, or if any of you could go to Inform TV channel, and I've got some stuff there, but it's not my best stuff. I'll try to put this channel piece there, so if you want to send it to your friends, you can go on YouTube and get it. But and then as we're running down on time, we saw the first glimpse of journalists in the Twin Cities on the 10 o'clock news deal, and Julie Nelson was the only one that I give a B+ to. The rest of them, Frank and Amelia, got a C+ at best. I went to Fox 9, that's supposed to be the consumer, or the Republican channel. The little bit I watched on there, God, I was disappointed. But you know, you try to flip channels, and I was trying to flip back between 4 and 11, and I found the most content on 11. At least what Julie was trying to do, and kept asking, because she was getting emails, does anybody have a plan to shut this down? And I actually prayed, and I'm looked at as a villain of villains in Minnesota, the most despicable person that claims to be a Christian in the state of Minnesota. I was actually praying, okay, you idiots, you two mayors and Governor Walz, whatever you do, don't send our poor National Guard guys out in the middle of the night. Let her burn, because that's what our 3 top attorneys in the state of Minnesota, Freemen, Erica MacDonald, and Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. That's what they set up. They lit the fuse, just as well let it go. And I guess we're going to have to improve some bonding money to rebuild the city. and it's just outrageous what went on. And then here we had, I've tried to say the couple little pieces I had, and I did here for 4 years on Alexandria here before I got censored off the air, is the fact that we have to look at how despicable our full power TV channels are in the Twin Cities. And back to my flicking channels of trying to see what I should watch to get a better understanding as the Twin Cities burned and were destroyed by rock throwing thugs. And I flicked to, I thought, yeah, I should go see what the Hubbard family is up to on this. I flicked to them, I think it was after 11 o'clock, and then they had Nightline on, and I thought, well, you know, they've got 2 full power stations, which means they could put 12 video streams on the multi-billion-dollar Hubbard family, which the congressional delegation of Minnesota, in my view, they're first and foremost, they got them back to the Forbes billionaire list. Oh, Klobuchar, Tina Smith, Colin Peterson, Emmer, Angie Craig, you should be really proud of yourself. And I thought, I'm going to go to Channel 42. Well, they'll surely have it on there. They had Mom, the alcoholic people working, and I'm just thinking, where is old Stan Hubbard that picked Trump for us, or picks what led the search with the lumberyard guy of Home Depot to give us the best potential Republicans? And what about, I think it's Rob, I haven't talked to him for years. I talked to him a couple times on his phone. He was always very gracious. But see, I can't, nor will the local deals come out here to Westport and look at how both the Hubbard family destroyed equipment where they got almost around $2 million of a temporary line that I could have used to broadcast here. Actually did once again paid for the engineering study, and I talked to the CBS people in New York that I want your tower site there. They got $10 million. Amy Klobuchar and Thune arranged $10 million for the Hubbard, for CBS to destroy the big tower out here. Actually, there was 2 towers, good antenna that I could have used, and I could have put that antenna on Hubbard's tower, but I don't know anything, of course. What do they do? Go to KCCCO and watch the dynamite job that Nora O'Donnell or CBS News. And I want to thank Gail King. She was the only one on this morning's TV when we had our Attorney General on and tried to say, hey, I don't want your ideology. Why weren't you doing something about it? And the reality is he didn't do anything. And how mind-bogglingly sad that is, that we have an Attorney General in our state that did absolutely nothing to see that the debacle that went on last night. And any of you people in the black community got the guts to stand up to him. And the only, in my view, the only person of color he represents, if you convert to Islam, Keith Ellison, our Attorney General, will go to bat for you. But if you're a measly Christian, he's not your man. So I'm trying to figure out my clock if I'm done. Thank you.